On a perfect summer afternoon in Soham, two young girls disappeared without a trace, an event that ignited the manhunt at the heart of Huntley and Maxine Carr. Their story begins not with a crime, but with a quiet moment, a snapshot at 5:04 p.m., capturing innocence seconds before it slipped away forever. What followed shattered a community, exposed fatal flaws in Britain's child protection systems, and left the nation asking how a caretaker and a teaching assistant could outwit police, neighbors, and even themselves, until small contradictions unraveled everything. Why did Soham's safety vanish so suddenly? This is the day innocence ended, and a chilling double life began. The barbecue had been planned for weeks, a simple family gathering in the heart of Soham, where everyone knew everyone else, and children drifted between gardens as if the whole village belonged to them. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, both 10 years old, spent that Sunday together as they had so many times before. Two best friends, inseparable, full of energy and laughter. Jessica had just come back from a family holiday in Menorca and brought Holly a silver necklace with the letter H on it, a small gift that meant the world between friends at that age. Wow. The girls spent the afternoon upstairs in Holly's room, singing along to pop songs, giggling over magazines, and trying on matching Manchester United shirts, David Beckham's number 7, their shared hero. At 5:04 p.m., Holly's dad, Kevin, snapped a picture that would become iconic. The two girls side by side, arms touching, both in those red football shirts, grinning straight at the camera. The sun was still high, the air thick with the smell of burgers and cut grass, and there was nothing in that moment to suggest anything but safety and happiness. That image, time-stamped to the minute, would later be printed on posters and banners, but in that instant it was just a photograph for the family album, a record of a perfect summer day, two girls on the cusp of adolescence, full of hope and the easy trust that childhood brings. The rhythm of the day was ordinary in the best way. After the photo, the girls joined the rest of the family for dinner. Chicken, salad, laughter around the table, parents chatting about work and school holidays. Holly and Jessica slipped away again, back upstairs to continue their games, their voices drifting down the stairs in bursts. The only thing on their minds was what song to play next, or how to convince Holly's mum to let them have ice cream before bed. There was no talk of danger, no reason for caution. In Soham, children walked to the shop for sweets, rode their bikes to the park, knocked on friends' doors unannounced. It was that kind of place. For those who knew them, Holly was the quieter of the two, thoughtful and gentle, with a shy smile and a love of animals. Jessica was outgoing, quick to laugh, always ready to stand up for her friends. Their bond was obvious, one picking up where the other left off, finishing each other's sentences, always together at school, in the playground, at birthday parties. They were the sort of friends who planned their futures together, who promised to be each other's bridesmaids, who could not imagine a world where one would be without the other. The sun hung low as the evening went on, the air cooling just enough to remind everyone that summer wouldn't last forever. But in that house, at that hour, there was nothing but warmth and the promise of more days like this. The 5:04 photograph captured not just their faces, but the spirit of a childhood untouched by fear. A moment that, without anyone knowing, would soon become a symbol of everything that was about to be lost. Holly and Jessica slipped out of the house just after 6. The summer evening was still bright enough that the village felt safe, unchanged. They didn't tell anyone they were leaving, just picked up a few coins and headed for the sports center vending machine, a walk they'd made countless times before. The girls were seen at 6:30 p.m. crossing Sand Street, chatting together, their matching red football shirts unmistakable, even at a distance. One neighbor, who knew them well, watched them pass by the war memorial, heading toward Yeshiot College Close. That was the last confirmed sighting. Back at the Wells house, dinner was clearing up, the easy rhythm of family life carrying on. No one noticed the time at first. It wasn't unusual for the girls to pop to the shop or dawdle on the green, but as the minutes ticked by, a subtle unease crept in. Holly's mom, Nicola, called up the stairs. No answer. Kevin Wells checked the garden, the lane, the neighbors' driveways. Jessica's parents began ringing the house, then Holly's mobile, which rang out unanswered. The usual explanations, lost track of time, playing at a friend's, started to wear thin as dusk settled over Soham. Within the hour, parents were knocking on doors, calling out into the quiet streets, retracing the girls' likely route. Familiar faces gathered quickly, neighbors, teachers, friends from church. In a place where everyone knew each other, word spread with the urgency of something deeply wrong. By 8 p.m., the search had grown into a coordinated effort, torches flickering through hedgerows, voices echoing across the playing fields. The police were called at 9:55 p.m. Officers arrived to find a community already mobilized, the usual boundaries between private and public dissolving in shared anxiety. Parents clung to hope, but the sense of unease sharpened. Holly and Jessica were responsible girls, never known to wander far, always home before dark. Each unanswered call, each empty street corner, chipped away at the idea that this was just a childish adventure gone long. By midnight, Soham was awake, porch lights burning, windows open to the night air, as the search expanded beyond the village's edges. In those hours, the ordinary safety of Soham was replaced by something colder, an awareness that childhood could vanish in the space between one familiar doorstep and the next. The point of no return had arrived, though no one could say it out loud yet. What began as a routine summer evening was now the start of a crisis that would pull the whole country into its orbit. By the time midnight arrived in Soham, the village had become a landscape of torchlight and quiet voices, every street corner and hedgerow combed by people who knew the girls by name. Over 400 officers would soon be assigned to the search, the kind of scale reserved for disasters, not sleepy market towns. Police command set up in Soham Village College, the same school where Ian Huntley worked as caretaker and Maxine Carr had been a teaching assistant. It was Huntley who unlocked doors for officers, fetched chairs for press conferences, and scribbled notes about building closures on whiteboards. He moved through the chaos with the calm of someone used to being needed, always ready with a helpful word for the volunteers and journalists swarming the campus. The press descended in force, cameras and microphones crowding the pavements, reporters filing live updates for a nation that had already begun to claim Holly and Jessica as their own. Huntley and Carr appeared in the thick of it, not as suspects, but as fixtures of the search. Carr's face, pale and drawn, was soon familiar on television screens. She spoke about the girls with a teacher's affection, holding up a handmade card Holly had given her at the end of term. She was just lovely, really lovely, Carr told Sky News, her voice trembling as she described how Holly and Jessica had wanted to be her bridesmaids. The country watched as Carr pleaded for their return, her words catching on the hope that still lingered in every household. Huntley, too, made himself available to the media. He gave interviews to the BBC and local journalists, recounting how he'd seen the girls walk past his house that Sunday evening. They seemed fine, very cheerful, happy, chatty, he told one reporter, describing himself as the last friendly face the girls had seen before vanishing. He spoke with a kind of measured sorrow, careful never to overplay his hand. When asked if he had noticed anything unusual, he shook his head. Just seemed like normal, happy kids. To those watching at home, Huntley came across as a steady, unremarkable presence, someone who belonged to the fabric of Soham, someone you would trust to keep an eye on your children. But beneath the surface, The contrast between public concern and private knowledge was already beginning to show its cracks. Journalists who spent time with Huntley and Carr noticed the way he controlled the conversation, jumping in to answer questions meant for Carr, offering unsolicited theories about what might have happened. Brian Farmer from the Press Association left their house uneasy, struck by Huntley's insistence on how each girl might react if approached by a stranger, details that felt too intimate, too rehearsed. Others noted Huntley's reluctance to be photographed, his careful management of what was said and shown. As the days wore on, the search became ritual. Each morning, new volunteers arrived, some from neighboring towns, some strangers drawn by the girls' faces on the news. The village green became a staging area for organized sweeps, police dogs, and mounted officers. Posters with the 504 photograph were taped to shop windows and bus stops, the image of two smiling girls in matching red shirts becoming a symbol of innocence under threat. Carr's appeals grew more emotional, her interviews laced with memories and promises, while Huntley remained composed, always ready to clarify timelines or suggest new areas to search. The community clung to hope, but the unease was growing, fed by the uncanny sense that something was not quite right with those at the heart of the search. Behind the scenes, police were beginning to compare notes. The couple's stories, so carefully aligned in public, showed subtle inconsistencies under scrutiny. Still, on the surface, Huntley and Carr embodied the village's grief and determination. Their willingness to stand before cameras, to join the search, to speak for the missing girls, became part of the story. A story that, for a brief moment, hid the truth in plain sight. The facade held, but only just. As the search reached its second week, suspicion was beginning to seep into the spaces between what was said and what was left unsaid, and the community's trauma deepened with every unanswered question. Detectives working the Soham case reached a point where the search for Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman could no longer be measured in missing posters or volunteer hours. It was now a matter of timelines, data, and the smallest cracks in carefully rehearsed stories. The couple at the heart of the investigation, Huntley and Carr, had been visible, helpful, and always willing to talk, but the details behind their public faces began to unravel under scrutiny. Phone records provided the first hard edges. Jessica's mobile, a pay-as-you-go Nokia, was switched off at 6:46 p.m. on August 4th, just over half an hour after the girls left the Wells house. The last signal, a digital farewell to the network, was picked up not by the usual Soham mast, but by the Burwell Tower, a few miles south. That detail mattered. Within Soham, only a handful of spots would default to the Burwell mast. One of them was the stretch of College Close outside number 5, the address where Huntley lived. Forensic telecoms experts mapped the coverage, tested signal strength, and confirmed it. Jessica's phone had gone dark right outside the caretaker's house. It was a precise, technical pin in the map, one that didn't fit the story Huntley had given about a brief chat on the doorstep. The timeline thickened with a closer look at Huntley's movements the following day. On August 5th, at 3:16 p.m., Huntley's mobile pinged the Eli cell site, 15 miles from Soham. By 3:36 p.m., he was at a tire depot in Ely, buying 4 brand-new Sava Effecta tires for his red Ford Fiesta. The invoice was time-stamped and recorded a registration number, L78TXR, that didn't exist. Huntley paid £10 in cash to have that false plate written on the paperwork. The mechanic later recalled the old tires were in good condition, barely worn, with at least 4 millimeters of tread left, no punctures, no visible damage. The change made no sense for a car that had only just passed its MOT and done about 1,000 miles since, unless you were worried about what the tires might reveal. Detectives pieced together the pattern. The car had been driven somewhere that left tracks worth erasing. Only someone who knew what kind of marks they'd left would rush to swap out perfectly good tires and then try to hide the evidence with a fake registration. The timing, the cash payment, the destroyed tires. Each detail pushed Huntley out of the realm of coincidence and into the focus of the investigation. Meanwhile, the couple's public narrative began to break down. The phone records showed Carr was in Grimsby, not Soham, on the night the girls vanished, contradicting what she'd told police and the press. Their calls and texts, dozens over that weekend, didn't match the sequence they described. When pressed, Carr's explanations shifted, the timeline blurred, and what had seemed like a united front started to fray. Within days, detectives were no longer searching for missing children. They were building a case. The digital trail, the tire swap, the inconsistencies in story and behavior all pointed in the same direction. The investigation was no longer about possibility, but about proof. The focus narrowed, the pressure mounted, and the facade that Huntley and Carr had built began to buckle under the weight of evidence. The stage was set for a forensic breakthrough, and the search for answers was about to turn into an arrest. On the night of August 16th, a police constable searching the Soham Village College grounds found himself standing in front of a row of plastic bins inside the hangar, keys still warm from Huntley's own bedroom. He lifted the lid on the third bin and pulled away a black plastic liner. Inside, he uncovered the charred remains of children's clothing, scraps of red polyester, melted and scorched but still unmistakable as Manchester United shirts. The bin also held trainers, underwear, and a bra, each item cut away from the body with a knife, then doused in petrol and set alight. The fire had failed to destroy the evidence. Forensic teams moved fast, photographing every detail, logging the time at 11 p.m. The clothing was knotted inside the liner, and on that plastic, Huntley's fingerprints appeared in 7 separate spots, both inside and out. 2 of his head hairs were recovered from the fabric. On the shirts, forensic scientists found minute traces of blood and saliva, enough to confirm the girls had died violently, even though no semen was detected. The fiber analysis told its own story. 49 fibers from the girls' shirts turned up on Huntley's clothes and throughout his house, while 77 fibers from his carpets and curtains were found on the shirts. The transfer ran both ways, impossible to explain by chance. Early the next morning, August 17th, the search ended with the discovery of 2 bodies in a drainage ditch near RAF Lakenheath, about 10 miles from Soham. The location was remote, hidden by nettles and undergrowth. Forensic ecologist Patricia Wiltshire noticed fresh side shoots on the trampled nettles, growth that only appears when the main stem has been crushed. She ran a controlled experiment at a local field center, walking a heavy load through nettles and tracking how long it took for similar shoots to appear. Day by day, she watched the new stems develop. After 13.5 days, the regrowth matched exactly what she saw at the burial site. Holly and Jessica had been missing for 13.5 days. The science fixed the date of the body's placement to the night they disappeared. No room left for doubt or confusion. Every link in the forensic chain pointed back to Huntley. His prints on the bin liner, his hair on the clothing. The 2-way fiber transfer, the timing proven by nettle regrowth, each detail locked the story in place. By 4 a.m., both Huntley and Carr were under arrest. The evidence spoke with a precision that left no space for denial. In the space of a few hours, the search for 2 missing girls became a murder inquiry with physical proof at every turn, and the forensic team's work made the truth impossible to hide. Ian Huntley's mind was a landscape of manipulation, entitlement, and an absence of remorse that would later baffle even seasoned forensic experts. His history, stretching back nearly a decade before Soham, was littered with accusations, 9 separate allegations of sexual offenses, including rape and indecent assault, none of which led to conviction. That pattern alone tells you something about how he operated. always on the edge, always just out of reach. Forensic psychiatrists who assessed Huntley after his arrest found no sign of psychosis or mental illness. Instead, they described traits consistent with psychopathy, grandiosity, superficial charm, a lack of empathy, and a chilling ability to compartmentalize. He could present as ordinary, even helpful, while masking a deep-seated drive to dominate and control. Huntley's relationships, especially with younger women, followed a script of jealousy, isolation, and coercion. He sought out partners he could shape, people who would orbit around his needs, never challenging the version of reality he constructed. Maxine Carr, by contrast, was shaped by a lifetime of insecurity and a desperate need for belonging. Her childhood was marked by bullying, eating disorders, and a fractured relationship with her father, wounds that left her looking for approval wherever she could find it. When she met Huntley, she was just 22, working as a teaching assistant, already vulnerable to someone who promised protection and purpose. What unfolded between them was a classic case of trauma bonding. Huntley isolated her from friends and family, undermined her confidence, and made himself the center of her world. Carr's sense of self became entwined with his moods and approval, a dynamic often seen in abusive partnerships. Psychiatric reports would later note her struggles with anxiety, depression, and disordered eating, signs of a person under psychological siege, not a calculating accomplice. Their bond was not one of equals. Huntley's need for control met Carr's craving for acceptance in a loop of dependency and denial. She provided him with an alibi, not out of malice, but because her reality was shaped by years of emotional manipulation. Experts pointed to her compliance as a survival strategy, the behavior of someone conditioned to put another's needs above her own safety or judgment. When police pressed her, Carr's stories shifted, timelines blurred, not because she was a skilled liar, but because the ground beneath her had always been unsteady. In the end, the psychiatric consensus was clear. Huntley was fully responsible, aware, and driven by a need to dominate. Carr, meanwhile, was swept along in his current, her choices shaped by fear, loyalty, and the long shadow of psychological abuse. On August 17, 2002, police found the bodies of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in a ditch near Lakenheath, confirming the worst fears of a nation. Forensic evidence, including fingerprints, fiber matches, and mobile phone record, irrefutably linked Ian Huntley to the crime. The trial exposed 9 previous allegations against Huntley that had not been fully investigated, leading to the Bichard inquiry and sweeping reforms in police vetting, most notably the creation of the Disclosure and Barring Service in 2012. Despite the volume of evidence, key questions remain. Huntley has never fully explained his actions, and some police files remain classified. The Soham murders revealed gaps in safeguarding that changed British law, but the full motivations behind the crime may never be understood. The case stands as a stark reminder: robust child protection systems are essential, and vigilance cannot be taken for granted.